Hi everyone, thank you for being here. This is Andy from Binance Labs. I'm really honored to have worked with people like Sankha and David and Fisher when I did the deal with Babylon. So really excited with what Babylon is building. So I want to start off first with how did you get to where you are today? What is your role and what do you do in Babylon?
Great. That was a very long end. I can't. So we have maybe 1 minute to answer. How did I get to where I am? but the gist of the question is, so I worked in multiple different crypto protocols. So my product journey started by working at Thorchain. So I find a lot of interesting design relevance between Thorchain, which was the first native chain swaps back in 2019, so spent like roughly 2.5 years with that protocol. Then I kind of spent some time with Osmosis where I met David, and he was like, hey, I think I'm going to try to build Bitcoin staking. So I was like probably the third guy to kind of join after Fisher with David on this journey with Bitcoin staking. And yeah, it's been a great journey, and we have actually had like really good partners to help us motivate in this journey.
So Babylon is a marketplace. Like you have the supply side, the BTC stakers, and then you have the demand side, like people who wants to seek security. Like what has been your experience talking to both sides, and like what are the sort of like what do they look for, or what are the problems that they usually talk about?
Yeah, so maybe there's a little bit of like an intellectual background. So as you know, we listened to a great talk from Eigenlayer. So outside of Ethereum, specifically, I would say if we pick up Cosmos or even Polygon, the founders are Bitcoin maxis. And actually, they even started these chains because they did not fully agree with how Ethereum was designed and bootstrapped and some of the constraints of Ethereum. So when David kind of came up with Bitcoin staking idea, we almost had like an intellectual overlap with some of these core founders like Ethan Buckman from Cosmos, Sandeep Nalawal from Polygon. So fundamentally, we see that Bitcoin holders are, if you're trying to build a product, they're the best people you want to have. Because in Silicon Valley, when you try to go and kind of build a product, the first thing they send you is, are your customers sticky? Because if you're trying to build a product with a high churn, chances are you're never going to get funding. So Bitcoin holders have been holding Bitcoin for almost 10, 12 years without really getting much other than hoping that innovation is going to come to the Bitcoin land. So we feel like when we look at the economic balance of Cosmos protocols, as well as Polygon, as well as some of these other new economies, it's really easy to motivate Bitcoin staking because fundamentally what we are bringing in is we're bringing in a choice of capital to these protocols, and generally they're going to have a much easier time managing the yield expectations of Bitcoin stakers than the yield expectations of native token holders. So that's kind of like the big choice which we are bringing into the space.
Yeah, I think just now you mentioned that like these Bitcoin holders, they have been like holding Bitcoin for years, and I think like Bitcoin holders and Ethereum holders are two very different profiles, and they are risk averse, they are conservative. And this is completely new primitive. What does it, like how do you convince them to pull the trigger, and like how do you make them feel comfortable to stake their Bitcoin?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we are actually taking it really slow because I think the primitive we are building, we do not think it's going to be an overnight adoption. So we are actually working very well with all our partners in first educating the risks of Bitcoin staking. Now, when you want to take added risk in order to have yield on your inventory, there are a lot of different ways you can take risk. So you can add liquidity to a DEX, you can be a collateral on a lending protocol, you can add it as staking. The best thing of taking staking yield is it's on-chain attributable. So if you're doing staking, what you're doing is you're taking on slashing risk, because of which you're getting paid. Now, if ever slashing happens, there is an on-chain record of that slashing. So it's not influenced by market activity. And so in some sense, and I'm borrowing a term from Eigenlayer, it's a very objectively attributable risk. And as a result, what I think is, if the Bitcoin holders would ever like to take additional risk, this is the best risks to start with. And so we feel very confident that it's going to give Bitcoin holders a lot more safety, as well as we are working with a lot of on-chain partners like Cubist to make sure that even this slashing risk does not happen.
And if we look at Bitcoin DeFi, like wrapped Bitcoin is probably like 1% of it. So the profile, like people who want to get additional use from Bitcoin is really low. So yeah, how do you think about that? Do you think it will go like more than 1%, 5%, 10%? What is like your estimated staking ratio?
So in terms of like how much of the market would actually adopt into Bitcoin, or is it, yeah. So I think we differentiate ourselves very far from wrapped Bitcoin, because if anybody has looked into the wrapped Bitcoin design, you're basically sending your Bitcoin to a custody, then that custody is actually minting the wrapped Bitcoin in an ERC 720 format that gets listed on lending platforms. So it's a very, I would say, a centralized operation. In case of Babylon, it's literally trustless. So you are in complete control of your destiny. You can choose to run a validator and stake your Bitcoin and just completely run this operation on your own. At the same time, if you trust like institutional staking providers like Figment, Coinbase, Custody, then you can also like delegate it to them. So I would say the risk of onboarding staking is a lot lower for Bitcoiners because we are self-custodial.
Got it, makes sense. So in this whole staking, let's say there's like staking, there's liquid staking, there's restaking, and there's like different competitors doing different stuff and also with different assets. How does Babylon fit into this whole thing? Like what sort of areas does it cover? And
Yeah, so that was the point of my talk. So what I think, if you learn from Ethereum, when Ethereum transitioned from proof of work to proof of stake, the first thing happened was the daily issuance rate was cut by a massive amount. I think it's like 85%. So you're basically not releasing new token. And when you not release new token, fundamentally what's happening is that if these tokens even, which is issuance, that helps the stakers, but that is a tax on the liquidity people, meaning the people who are not staking. So Ethereum kind of transitioning from proof of work to proof of stake, it created the liquid staking industry, it created the liquid restaking industry. Actually, Eigenlayer came around because of proof of stake. So it really helped the design space in terms of creating a completely different yield complex without issuing too much tokens. So fundamentally, the inspiration for Babylon is actually to capture the mind share of Ethereum, which transitioned from proof of work to proof of stake to get the staking industry activated. But then once the staking is activated, we are also enabling restaking.
Do you think it's harder to convince people to stake Bitcoin or people to build with Babylon?
That's a great question. I need to actually think in terms of the growth. So I think Bitcoiners, there are just two types of participants in Bitcoiners. So there are these big hodlers and whales, and then there are small retail players. So fundamentally, the whales are looking for yield opportunity, and specifically in the Bitcoin space, the native yield options almost does not exist. So if you can do a proper track record of auditing, getting the right traction, getting the right investors, I think the people are willing to stake. But in terms of building, that's a different challenge because Bitcoin does not have smart contracts, right? So you have to kind of come up with layer 2s, or you have to kind of look at POS chains, which can take Bitcoin as a collateral. So I would say that the challenge or the initiative on our side has been really to work on the demand side, but we feel like the Cosmos Hub adoption, as well as we are getting a lot of new traction in terms of existing L1s looking at finality providers. Actually, as an ex-employee of Thorchain, they're kind of looking at Babylon for Bitcoin staking. So we're kind of really excited to slowly get adoption from existing chains.
Speaking about the demand side, how is it how is it going like on the ecosystem side, and what sort of projects are you looking at, like coming to speak to you to?
Right. So we were initially trying to go to market with this idea that if you use Bitcoin capital for staking, you're actually paying less issuance than if you are using your native token for staking. But then as we were like, we now have a big BD team and they talk to a lot of teams. So one of the things we found is the opportunity is not just in staking, but it's actually also in providing liquidity of Bitcoin. Cosmos roughly has just $20 million worth Bitcoin. I was Googling, trying to find some liquidity parts for Solana. I barely could find. I found like a perp on Solana, which is doing really well, like Drift protocol. And I think the open interest I found was $20,000. I think it's wrong, but it may be 2 million or something. Maybe I'm misquoting, but it's 2 million. So roughly, outside of Ethereum, the Bitcoin liquidity is maybe $50 million, which is kind of really shows the problem. So at Babylon, we are now having this massive projects building on us, which is liquid staking, where they're going to release liquid receipts of Bitcoin, and these are going to be minted on the Ethereum ecosystem, on the Cosmos ecosystems. So we feel like we want to solve not just the security bootstrapping problem, but also onboarding liquidity of Bitcoin in the different app chains.
Got it, got it. So what's next for you guys? Like, congrats with the paradigm raise. Like, what are you personally excited about for Babylon in the next 3 months, 6 months? Like, what are the milestones ahead?
Yeah, so we're going to mainnet, I would say the end of this month. The first phase of the mainnet is similar to EigenLayer. Like, we would like Bitcoin holders to come and lock their Bitcoin as a show of interest in the staking opportunity. So I think we're extremely, we are very working very hard in making sure we do a lot of security audits. Already we have 3 or 4 of the security audits done, but you will see us taking even more as we go into a phase-wise mainnet, because we think like security is probably the biggest concern for Bitcoin holders. However, we're also getting some positive feedback from the miners, because they really think that the design which we have, where Babylon does not custody Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is staying on the Bitcoin chain. It's a self-custodial design. That gives a lot of comfort. But at the same time, blockchain protocols, which are coming from a 0 to 1 initiative, a lot of it is being very secure and also being a little slow in executing, in making sure that you really understand the security aspects.
Cool, cool. Yeah, really excited for the mainnet coming, and really looking forward to see this whole research that has been going for 2 years materializing into something tangible and going live. Yeah. So last few minutes, just want to see if anyone has any questions from the audience. All right.
I'll just dig in a little bit to one of Andy's questions a little bit more. I mean, you talked about the economic balance of some of these L1s that need to fix their negative economic balance. I mean, some of the bigger ones you put up there, Solana. I mean, you mentioned Aptos. You didn't necessarily show that. I mean, what are their reactions to this?
Yeah. So because Babylon is a Cosmos SDK chain, so we feel like charity begins at home. So we have been getting a lot of positive response. So the Cosmos Hub has onboarded Bitcoin security. They are actually working out, as Robert was saying, that we think the Bitcoin security marketplace is going to be market-driven. So when you see a certain amount of stake coming to the Bitcoin chain, it's actually going to be market-dependent on how much the Cosmos Hub would give as an inflation. But one of our core theses of why we wanted to start with Cosmos Hub is we think like Bitcoin holders, once they want to take on that slashing risk, they really want to look at the quality of the token. So yeah, we don't want like a meme coin or like a highly volatile token which has not had a big history to be given as one of the first AVS yields outside of Babylon chain. So I think we're looking at it more by proving a data point, which for us is the Cosmos Hub aspect. And as people see the adoption, we expect to see other chains, I'm sure like Solana has a very big trade-off with like crypto economic security being a meme. So I'm not sure if they would buy into this, but that data was just projection of the data. But what we see is that there's a strong adoption aspect of chains, the L1 chains, which are Bitcoin maxis, for them to see that it's actually a rational data-driven choice dictated by economics, and it's not some kind of favored alliance.
All right. Any? Oh, yeah, we can take one more.
Thank you. I think as Adam also previously pointed out, in Ethereum, there's also pressure for project to pay who's going to pay that yield. So I'm wondering if do you see, is there any projects or yield source coming up for Babylon, organic ones? Do you see any in near terms, mid terms?
So when you say organic ones, what do you mean by that?
I think right now most of the restaking yield is coming from expectation for airdrop, even for some Ethereum restaking projects. So I'm wondering for Babylon, is that
got
same?
it. Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
So, and that's where the Cosmos Hub adoption of Bitcoin security from Babylon is very unique, because fundamentally there is a proposal on Cosmos Hub which is called like Prop 848, which basically reduced the inflation which was given out to the atom holders from 18% to 10%. So the whole genesis of the idea came around with me working with Jihan Trumblack from the Informal Systems Group, was to see that we looked at the market expectations of the yield for Bitcoiners, and we found that Bitcoiners would actually take almost a fraction of that inflation which is going to the atom holders. So fundamentally, this dual-sided marketplace where Bitcoin is coming, asking for a certain interest rate, which could be lower than the interest rate you're paying to the native token holders, that's going to set the interest rate for Bitcoin stakers. So we feel like the Cosmos Hub adoption of Babylon was not based on any kind of potential airdrop or something. It was based on hardcore economics, that it makes sense to pay a certain lower inflation yield in terms of atom to the Bitcoin stakers.
All right. Yep. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
For the, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.